She was acting off. I had a hunch. On our anniversary dinner, I exposed her in front of her mom, dad, and side guy. He nearly choked on the steak. I should have trusted my gut from the beginning. You know that feeling when something just feels wrong? When the person you've been with for 3 years suddenly becomes a stranger in your own home. That's exactly what was happening with my girlfriend, and looking back, I was probably in denial for way longer than I should have been. It started about a month before our anniversary. Little things at first. She'd get these random text messages and her whole face would light up in a way it hadn't for me in months. She'd quickly flip her phone over when I walked into the room, claiming it was just work stuff or her sister being dramatic again. Her sister who, by the way, I'd met plenty of times and who never sent the kind of messages that made someone smile like they'd just won the lottery. Then came the late nights at the office. Now, I'm not unreasonable. I know people have busy periods at work. But when someone who usually complains about staying 5 minutes past 5 suddenly starts pulling 12-hour days 3 times a week, you start to wonder. Especially when those late nights coincide with her being completely exhausted and uninterested in spending any quality time together. The physical distance started creeping in too. We used to be one of those couples who couldn't keep their hands off each other. Not in an obnoxious way, but we'd always be touching somehow, holding hands while watching TV, her head on my shoulder during movies, random hugs while cooking dinner. All of that just stopped. She'd stiffen up when I'd try to cuddle, claiming she was too tired or too hot or too whatever excuse came to mind first. But the real kicker was how she started treating our anniversary. 3 years together, and suddenly she's acting like it's just another day on the calendar. When I brought up making dinner reservations somewhere nice, she just shrugged and said we could order pizza and watch Netflix if I really wanted to do something. Pizza and Netflix. For our anniversary. This from the same woman who used to plan elaborate surprises for my birthday and insisted we celebrate the anniversary of our first date every month for the first year we were together. About a week before the anniversary, I couldn't take it anymore. The constant knot in my stomach, the way she'd practically run to answer her phone in another room, the way she'd come home from these alleged work sessions smelling like cologne that definitely wasn't mine. I felt like I was going crazy, questioning everything, wondering if I was just being paranoid and insecure. So I did something I never thought I'd do. Something that goes against every principle I thought I had about trust and privacy in relationships. I looked at her phone. She'd left it on the kitchen counter while she was in the shower, and for once, it wasn't face down. A message notification popped up from someone named Ashley from work, and my heart just sank. Not because of the name. I knew all her work friends, and there was no Ashley. But because of what the preview showed. Can't wait to see you tonight. Beautiful. My hands were shaking as I unlocked her phone. I knew her passcode because we'd never had secrets before, or at least I thought we hadn't. What I found made me feel physically sick. Months of messages to this Ashley person. Messages that started out seemingly innocent but quickly escalated into the kind of intimate conversations that should only happen between people in a relationship. The worst part wasn't even the obviously romantic content. It was reading how she described our relationship to him, how she complained about me being clingy and boring, how she said she was only staying with me because it was comfortable and she didn't want to deal with the hassle of moving out and starting over. How she laughed about me trying to plan something special for our anniversary when all she wanted was to be with him instead. I sat on our bathroom floor reading through months of evidence that my relationship was a complete lie, and I honestly didn't know whether to cry or throw up or both. 3 years of my life. 3 years of planning a future together, of talking about moving in together permanently, of me falling asleep every night thinking I was the luckiest person in the world to have found someone who loved me as much as I loved them. But here's the thing about betrayal. Once the initial shock wears off, it can turn into something much more dangerous. At least for me, it turned into a cold, calculating anger that I didn't even know I was capable of. I wasn't going to just confront her and have her lie to my face or try to gaslight me into thinking I was imagining things. I wasn't going to give her the chance to spin this into somehow being my fault for snooping. No, I was going to make sure that when the truth came out, it came out in a way that she couldn't wiggle out of or minimize. I was going to make sure there were witnesses who cared about both of us and would see exactly who she really was. That's when I decided to invite her parents to our anniversary dinner. Her parents absolutely adored me. From the very first time she brought me home, they treated me like I was already part of the family. Her mom would send me care packages when I was stressed about work, and her dad and I bonded over our shared love of terrible action movies and good barbecue. They'd been dropping hints for months about when I was going to propose, and honestly, before I found those messages, I'd been seriously considering it. I knew that having them there when everything came to light would serve two purposes. First, she'd have to face the disappointment and heartbreak of two people whose opinions mattered to her more than anyone else's. And second, I'd have backup when she inevitably tried to deny everything or turn it around on me. So I called her mom and spun a story about wanting to surprise my girlfriend with a family dinner for our anniversary. How I thought it would mean so much to her to have the people she loved most there to celebrate with us. Her mom was absolutely thrilled and immediately started planning what she'd wear and what wine to bring. When I told my girlfriend about the surprise dinner with her parents, her reaction told me everything I needed to know. She didn't look happy or touched by the gesture. She looked annoyed and trapped. She tried to talk me out of it, claiming she'd rather have a quiet evening just the two of us, but I insisted that her parents were so excited, and it would hurt their feelings to cancel now. But I wasn't done with the surprises, because I had one more card to play. I'd managed to figure out who Ashley from work really was by doing some detective work through social media. It wasn't hard once I had some of the personal details he'd mentioned in their messages. And here's where my plan got a little crazy, but I was past the point of caring about playing it safe. I created a fake social media account and sent him a message, pretending to be my girlfriend. I told him that she had to change the location of their usual meeting spot for that night because of a family emergency, and gave him the address of the restaurant where we'd be having our anniversary dinner. I told him to come at exactly 7:30 and that she'd be waiting for him. The night of our anniversary dinner, I felt like I was watching myself from outside my body. I kept thinking that this couldn't really be happening, that I couldn't really be about to blow up my entire relationship in front of her parents. But every time I wavered, I'd remember those messages. The way she'd laughed about me with him. The way she'd been lying to my face for months while I was planning our future together. Her parents arrived right on time, her mom carrying a beautiful bouquet of flowers and her dad with a bottle of wine that probably cost more than our usual monthly dinner budget. They were so happy, so excited to be celebrating with us. Her mom kept gushing about how sweet it was that I'd thought to include them, and her dad kept making jokes about how I was setting the bar too high for other guys. My girlfriend sat through all of this looking increasingly uncomfortable. She kept checking her phone, presumably getting messages from her lover asking where she was. She barely touched her appetizer and kept making forced conversation with her parents while shooting me looks that I couldn't quite read. Then, at exactly 7:30, he walked in. I saw him before anyone else did, scanning the restaurant like he was looking for someone. He was exactly what I'd expected based on his social media photos, tall, well-dressed, the kind of guy who probably spent more on his hair products than I spent on groceries. When his eyes found our table, I watched his face go through about 5 different emotions in the span of 2 seconds. Confusion, because this clearly wasn't what he'd been expecting. Recognition, as he spotted my girlfriend sitting there looking like she'd seen a ghost. And then panic, as he realized he'd walked into some kind of trap. But here's where the story takes a turn that I never could have planned or predicted. Her dad saw him at almost the exact same moment I did. And instead of just being confused about why some random guy was staring at our table, her dad went completely white. Then red. Then he stood up so fast his chair fell backward. The guy, let's call him Brad because he looked like a Brad, saw our dad and his face went from panic to absolutely terrified. He actually took a step backward toward the door, but it was too late. Her dad was already walking toward him with the kind of expression that made everyone in the restaurant stop their conversations and look over. That's when her dad said the words that changed everything. He knew exactly who this guy was. And he was about to tell all of us why. Update 1. I honestly didn't expect this post to blow up the way it has, but I guess people love a good drama story. A lot of you have been asking for the rest of what happened that night, so here goes. Fair warning, this gets pretty intense. So her dad is walking toward Brad with murder in his eyes, and I'm sitting there trying to figure out what the heck is going on. Her mom is looking back and forth between her husband and this random guy like she's watching a tennis match. And my girlfriend? She's literally frozen in her chair, staring at Brad like she's trying to telepathically tell him to run. Her dad reaches Brad before he can make it to the door, and I hear him say something that made my blood run cold. He called him by name. Not just his first name, but his full name. And then he said something about how he should have known he'd never learn his lesson. That's when it all came out. This wasn't just some random guy my girlfriend had been having an affair with. This was someone her dad knew professionally. Someone he'd hired as an intern at his company about 2 years ago. Someone he'd had to fire after multiple women complained about his behavior. Her dad started talking loud enough for half the restaurant to hear, and honestly, I don't think he cared who was listening. He told us all about how this guy had been harassing female employees, making inappropriate comments, and generally being the kind of creep that makes workplaces toxic for women. How he'd had to involve HR and legal before finally getting rid of him. And now here he was, having an affair with his daughter. Brad tried to leave, but her dad wasn't having it. He blocked his path and started demanding answers. How long had this been going on? How had he even met his daughter? Did he know she was in a relationship? That's when Brad made the mistake of trying to play innocent. He claimed he didn't know who her dad was, that this was all just a misunderstanding, that he was just meeting a friend for drinks and must have gotten the wrong restaurant. Her dad pulled out his phone and started showing Brad pictures from his company website, pictures of office parties where Brad had worked, pictures that proved he was lying about not knowing who he was. And that's when the final piece of the puzzle fell into place. Brad hadn't just randomly met my girlfriend somewhere. He'd specifically sought her out because he knew who her dad was. He'd found her on social media through her dad's company connections and had been planning this whole thing as some kind of twisted revenge against the man who'd cost him his job. My girlfriend finally found her voice and started denying everything, claiming she had no idea who this guy was, that this was all some kind of misunderstanding. But I'd had enough of the lies. I pulled out my phone and started reading some of the messages I'd screenshotted from her phone. The romantic ones. The ones where she complained about me. The ones where she talked about being excited to finally leave me for him. Her mom started crying. Not quiet tears, but full-on sobbing that had people at other tables staring at us. Her dad looked like he was either going to punch Brad or have a heart attack. And the look on my girlfriend's face when she realized I'd known all along, that I'd planned this whole thing? I've never seen anyone look so betrayed and terrified at the same time. But the night wasn't over yet. Because Brad, apparently realizing that his cover was completely blown and his revenge plot had backfired spectacularly, decided to go down swinging. He started telling everyone in earshot about his relationship with my girlfriend, how she'd been complaining about me for months, how she'd been planning to leave me anyway, how I was apparently terrible in bed and boring and clingy and basically every insecurity I'd ever had about myself. That's when her dad finally lost it completely. I'm not going to go into detail about what happened next because I don't want to glorify violence, but let's just say that restaurant security got involved, and Brad left with a lot less dignity than he'd arrived with. The aftermath was almost as dramatic as the confrontation itself. Her parents couldn't even look at her. Her mom kept apologizing to me like her daughter's betrayal was somehow her fault. Her dad was muttering about restraining orders and background checks and how he'd failed as a parent. And my girlfriend? She just sat there in stunned silence while her entire world imploded around her. No more lies. No more excuses. No more manipulation. Just the truth, laid bare in front of everyone she cared about. We all left the restaurant separately that night. Her parents took their car. I took mine, and she had to call a ride because she'd come with me, and there was no way I was driving her anywhere ever again. I went home to our apartment, well, my apartment now, and started packing her things. I figured she'd probably stay with her parents for a while, and I wanted her stuff ready to go when she came to get it. I wasn't interested in drawn-out conversations or attempts at reconciliation. I wasn't interested in hearing about how sorry she was or how it didn't mean anything or how we could work through this. Some things you can work through. Cheating with a predator who targeted you to get revenge on your father while lying to your partner for months? That's not one of them. Update 2. Okay, I really wasn't planning to update again, but the messages I've been getting have convinced me that people want to know how this all played out. Also, some pretty wild stuff has happened since that disaster of an anniversary dinner, so buckle up. First off, let me address some of the comments I've been getting. Yes, what I did was calculated and probably pretty harsh. Yes, I could have just confronted her privately and saved everyone the public humiliation. But honestly, after reading months of messages where she laughed about me behind my back and planned to string me along indefinitely while having her fun on the side, I wasn't feeling particularly charitable about protecting her feelings. Some of you asked if I felt bad about involving her parents, and the answer is complicated. I felt terrible about hurting them, because they're genuinely good people who didn't deserve to find out their daughter was capable of this kind of deception. But I don't regret them finding out the truth about who she really is, even if it was painful. So here's what happened in the days following the restaurant incident. She didn't come home that night, which I honestly expected. I figured she was at her parents' place trying to do damage control, probably spinning some story about how this was all a misunderstanding or how I'd somehow driven her to cheat. I spent the evening packing up her stuff and trying to process everything that had happened. Around midnight, her mom called me. Not her mom. And let me tell you, that was a conversation I wasn't prepared for. Her mom was still crying, but she wasn't calling to defend her daughter or try to talk me into giving her another chance. She was calling to apologize, to tell me how ashamed and disappointed she was, to ask me if there was anything she could do to help me through this situation that her daughter had created. That phone call honestly broke my heart more than the cheating did. This woman who had treated me like a son for 3 years was trying to comfort me while dealing with her own devastation about what kind of person her daughter had turned out to be. She told me that my girlfriend had tried to minimize what happened, claiming it was just an emotional affair that hadn't gotten physical, that Brad had manipulated her, that she'd been planning to break it off anyway. But her parents weren't buying it. They'd seen the messages I'd read aloud. They'd witnessed her reaction when Brad showed up. They knew their daughter had been living a lie for months. Her dad, apparently, had spent the evening making phone calls. Remember how Brad had targeted my girlfriend specifically because of who her father was? Well, her dad has connections in their industry, and he was making sure that everyone knew exactly what kind of person Brad was. Not just the harassment stuff from his previous job, but this new information about him deliberately targeting someone's daughter for revenge. Let's just say Brad's career prospects in this city became very limited very quickly. But the real surprise came 2 days later, when my girlfriend finally showed up at the apartment to get her things. She looked terrible, like she hadn't slept or eaten since the restaurant. Her eyes were red and puffy, her hair was a mess, and she was wearing the same clothes she'd worn to dinner. For a split second, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. She tried to start the conversation with an apology, but I cut her off. I told her I didn't want to hear it, that I just wanted her to get her stuff and leave. That seemed to surprise her, like she'd expected me to be open to some kind of discussion about our relationship. But then she said something that made me realize I still didn't know the whole truth. She told me that her parents had kicked her out, that they told her they were too disappointed and disgusted to have her in their house, that her mom had cried all night and her dad hadn't spoken to her since the restaurant, that she had nowhere to go because her friends all knew me too and had heard about what happened. Part of me wanted to ask why she thought I should care about her problems when she'd created all of them herself. But another part of me was curious about something else she'd said. She mentioned that her friends had heard about what happened, but I hadn't told anyone except you guys here on Reddit. That's when she admitted something that honestly shocked me, even after everything else. The story had gotten out because someone at the restaurant had recorded part of the confrontation. Not the whole thing, but enough to get the general idea of what was happening. And that someone had posted it on social media. Apparently, watching a woman get exposed for cheating on her anniversary in front of her parents and her affair partner was the kind of drama that people love to share. The video had been passed around enough that people in our social circle had seen it and put the pieces together about who we were. So not only was our relationship over, but it had become local entertainment. Her reputation was completely destroyed. Mine was a mix of sympathy and respect for how I'd handled it, and everyone we knew had front-row seats to the most humiliating moment of her life. I probably should have felt bad about that, but I didn't. She'd made choices that led to consequences, and those consequences were hers to deal with. She finished packing her stuff in silence after that. I helped her carry boxes to her car, not because I wanted to be nice, but because I wanted her gone as quickly as possible. When she tried one more time to apologize or explain or ask if we could talk later, I just told her no. That there was nothing to talk about. That I hoped she figured out her life, but it wasn't going to be with me. But the story doesn't end there, because Brad apparently wasn't done making terrible decisions. Final update. I really hope this is the last time I have to update this post, because honestly, I'm ready to move on from this whole situation. But some stuff happened that I think you all deserve to know about, especially those of you who've been following this drama from the beginning. It's been about 2 months since the restaurant incident, and I thought things were finally settling down. I'd been focusing on work, spending time with friends, and generally trying to rebuild my life without her in it. I'd even started talking to someone new. Nothing serious yet, but it felt good to remember that there were people out there who wouldn't lie to my face for months while planning to betray me. Then last week, I got a call from her dad. I almost didn't answer, because while I appreciated how supportive he and her mom had been, I was trying to move forward and not dwell on the past. But something told me I should pick up. He was calling to warn me that Brad had been asking around about me. Apparently, Brad had been having trouble finding work after her dad made sure everyone in their industry knew what kind of person he was. And instead of reflecting on his behavior and maybe trying to become a better person, Brad had decided that all of his problems were my fault. According to her dad, Brad had been telling people that I'd set him up, that I'd somehow manipulated the whole situation to make him look bad. That if I hadn't been so controlling and suspicious, none of this would have happened. Basically, he was trying to rewrite history to make himself the victim instead of the predator who'd targeted someone's daughter for revenge. Her dad was worried that Brad might try to confront me or cause problems for me at work or something like that. He'd already filed a police report about Brad's harassment of his daughter, and he wanted me to be aware in case I needed to do the same. I thanked him for the heads up, but honestly, I wasn't too worried. What was Brad going to do? He'd already shown everyone exactly who he was. His reputation was destroyed, his career was over, and he was facing potential legal consequences for his harassment. I figured he had bigger problems to worry about than bothering me. I was wrong. 3 days after that phone call, I came home from work to find my car keyed. Someone had scratched long, deep gouges down both sides and across the hood. They'd also slashed 2 of my tires and left a note under my windshield wiper that was basically a rant about how I'd ruined his life and how I was going to pay for it. The note wasn't signed, but the handwriting matched some work documents that her dad had shown me from when Brad was his intern. Plus, the security camera from my apartment complex caught him in the act. I called the police immediately and filed a report. They were able to enhance the security footage enough to clearly identify Brad, and combined with the previous harassment report her dad had filed, they had enough evidence to arrest him for vandalism and harassment. But that's not even the craziest part of the story. When the police went to arrest Brad, they found out he'd been living in his car for the past month because he couldn't afford rent after losing his job. And in his car, they found a notebook full of detailed plans for escalating his harassment campaign against me, her dad, and even my ex-girlfriend. He'd been stalking all of us. He had our addresses, our work schedules, information about our daily routines. He'd been planning to vandalize her parents' house next, and then escalate to more serious crimes if that didn't make him feel better about his situation. The police said it was one of the most disturbing cases of harassment and stalking they'd seen in a while. This wasn't just someone acting out in anger. This was someone who'd become completely obsessed with blaming everyone else for the consequences of his own actions. Brad is now in jail, and from what I understand, he's going to be there for a while. The charges include stalking, harassment, vandalism, and some other stuff related to the threats he'd written in his notebook. Her dad's lawyer thinks there might be federal charges too, since some of his harassment crossed state lines when he was trying to damage her dad's business reputation. As for my ex-girlfriend, I heard through mutual friends that she's moved to another state to stay with some relatives. Apparently, she couldn't handle the social fallout from the restaurant video and decided to start over somewhere else. I don't know if she's getting help or trying to figure out why she made the choices she did, but honestly, that's not my problem anymore. Her parents sent me a card last week thanking me for everything and apologizing again for what their daughter put me through. They also included a check to cover the damage to my car, even though I told them that wasn't necessary. The note from her mom said that they'd raised her better than that, and they were ashamed that she'd turned out to be someone who could lie and cheat and manipulate people who loved her. I think that's what hurt them the most, not just that she'd cheated, but that she'd become someone they didn't recognize. Someone who could look them in the eye at family dinners and holidays while secretly planning to betray the person they thought of as a future son-in-law. So that's where things stand now. Brad is in jail where he belongs. My ex is gone and hopefully getting her life together somewhere far away from me. Her parents are dealing with their own grief about the daughter they thought they knew. And me? I'm doing okay. I won't lie and say this whole experience didn't mess me up for a while. Finding out that someone you love has been living a double life for months does something to your ability to trust people. I spent a lot of nights wondering what signs I'd missed, what I could have done differently, whether I'd ever be able to believe someone again when they said they loved me. But I also learned something important about myself. When someone shows you who they really are, believe them. When your gut tells you something is wrong, listen to it. And when someone betrays your trust in the most fundamental way possible, you don't have to set yourself on fire to keep them warm. I'm not saying what I did at the restaurant was perfect or that everyone should handle betrayal the way I did. But I'm not sorry for making sure the truth came out, even if it was messy and public and hurt people's feelings. Sometimes the truth is uncomfortable, but it's still better than living a lie. The woman I'm talking to now knows this whole story. I was upfront about it because I figured if she was going to judge me for how I handled things, better to know sooner rather than later. But instead of being put off by the drama, She said she respected that I'd stood up for myself and hadn't let someone walk all over me. She also pointed out something I hadn't really thought about before. By exposing what my ex was doing, I probably saved her parents years of watching their daughter continue down a destructive path. By making sure Brad faced consequences for his actions, I might have prevented him from targeting other women in the future. Sometimes doing the hard thing is actually the right thing, even when it feels cruel in the moment. I'm not sure if I believe in karma or cosmic justice or any of that stuff, but it does seem like everyone ended up exactly where they deserve to be. Brad is facing the consequences of a lifetime of predatory behavior. My ex is dealing with the fallout from months of lies and betrayal. Her parents know the truth about their daughter, even though it hurts. And me? I'm free to build a life with someone who actually deserves my trust. So that's my story. 3 years of my life that turned out to be built on lies, one anniversary dinner that changed everything, and 2 months of dealing with the aftermath of someone else's terrible decisions. It's been messy and painful and dramatic, but I think I'm better off knowing the truth than living in a fantasy. If you're in a relationship where something feels off, where your partner is suddenly distant and secretive and different, trust your instincts. Don't make excuses for behavior that doesn't make sense. Don't convince yourself that you're being paranoid when every alarm bell in your head is going off. And if you find out that someone has been betraying you, remember that you deserve better. You deserve someone who chooses you every day, not someone who keeps you around as a backup plan while they explore other options. You deserve honesty, even when it's complicated. You deserve loyalty, especially when it's difficult. Most importantly, you deserve to be with someone who would never make you feel like you have to check their phone to trust them. Someone who would never put you in a position where you're questioning your own sanity because their words and actions don't match up. That's the kind of relationship I'm looking for now, and honestly, after everything I've been through, I think I have a pretty good idea of what that looks like. It looks like transparency, consistency, and choosing each other even when things get hard. It definitely doesn't look like saving your affair partner's number under a fake name and complaining about your loyal partner to someone who's using you for revenge. But anyway, that's enough for me. Thanks to everyone who followed this story and offered support along the way. It meant more than you know to have people validate that what happened to me wasn't okay and that I deserved better. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a life to rebuild and a future to look forward to. One that's built on truth this time.